This story takes place in the summer of 2012. I'm a male, and I was 25 at the time. I was living by myself in a one-bedroom apartment that I had recently moved into after a messy divorce. It wasn't fancy, but I was pretty proud and happy to be living on my own once again. My apartment was located in a suburban part of the city that I lived in Missouri. One night, I had finished a closing shift at a local restaurant where I was an assistant manager. It was around midnight, and I was looking forward to a night of Comedy Central and beers, seeing how my schedule rendered me a night owl. I returned to my apartment, took a long shower, and turned on the TV after opening my first cold one. I stayed up till around 3 a.m., watching stand-up comedy and drinking. I eventually turned the lights out and left the TV on as I drifted to sleep. Now, to give a visual, my apartment was on the second floor. The only window was in my bedroom, and there was a sliding glass door in the living room that led to my balcony. The front door led directly outside, and there's no way of seeing out that particular side other than a small peephole in the door. Around 4 in the morning, I was suddenly awakened by a frantic pounding at my front door. I'm talking constant beating that seemed like someone was trying to break the door with their fists. I immediately sprung up from the couch and ran to the door wearing only a pair of basketball shorts. I looked out my peephole, and there was a silhouette by the orange glow of the security light. The figure looked to be that of a small girl. I freaked the fuck out, but I thought that maybe she was in some kind of trouble. Here's where I made a big mistake. I slowly and quietly unlocked the door to investigate. She then immediately turned the doorknob and threw her body weight into the door, forcing it open, and me against the wall. The only light on at the time was from my TV, and the next thing I knew, this girl was stumbling into my apartment like a zombie. I quickly turned a light on to see a dark-skinned, dark-haired girl, probably in her late 20s. She was about 5'4", maybe about 110 pounds, soaking wet. She wore a tank top and shorts. I'm not a big guy. I'm around 5'10" and 155 pounds, but I arrogantly consider myself physically superior to her. She turned towards me, and her eyes were closed. I immediately grabbed her by the arm, saying, "What the hell are you doing? This is my place, and you need to leave." She replied, "I have to come in. I'm cold." Now, mind you, it's the middle of August, and well, not cold at all outside. After I got a hold of her arms, I was amazed at the strength that she had. I was trying to imagine what was going on with her. I managed to get around behind her and pin her arms back, and attempted to drag her out of my apartment. I was in no position to call the cops, seeing how my hands were full, and I had no idea where my phone was. As I began to drag her out, saying, "You need to leave now," she flung her head back into my face, bloodying my nose and lip. I maintained my composure and went outside to ask my neighbor for help. The only problem was that my nearest neighbor was directly across from me, and their door was wide open, and the other surrounding apartments were vacant. She remained in my apartment, just standing there, facing me with her eyes closed. She yelled, "Come in here!" I replied, "Okay, I guess I will." I re-entered my apartment, and this time a little angry but mainly just confused. I once again grabbed her by both arms, blood streaming down my face and neck. This time I wasn't letting her fight back. I dragged her outside, and she put up a little resistance. I took her inside the apartment across from me, believing this was where she lived. After all the other apartments around me are empty. There appeared to be a tall, skinny Caucasian man passed out on the floor. I called for him, and he just moaned. After she was inside the apartment, I sat her down, and I figured that I would be a gentleman and introduce myself. "My name is Jonathan, and you are?" She just shouted,
I'm cold.
I ran back inside my apartment and locked my door. I found my phone between the couch cushions and called my apartment manager. The manager lived in the complex and had given me his cell phone number in case of an emergency. After telling him what happened, he seemed just as shocked and angry as me, and he said that he would handle it. Next thing I knew, about 3 cops, an ambulance, and the fire department were lining my street, lighting up the whole block. The police knocked on my door and took my statement, while the apartment manager fixed me an ice pack for my busted face. I declined medical attention as well as pressing any charges, seeing how whoever this girl was, she was not of sound mind when she did this. The police told me that she was under the influence of alcohol and who knows what else. She ended up going to the hospital, and I never found out what happened with the man passed out on the floor. Naturally, I didn't sleep for the rest of that night, and all I can say is, crazy, druggy sleepwalker, let's not meet again. In the summer of 2015, I was running one morning when I came to a park in my town. I guess it was a Friday morning. It wasn't at all crowded, but some people were still there. I always run my usual road, and I intended to do so this day as well. When you pass the park, the street that you're on divides into 3 more streets. The middle street is more the road for runners, cyclists, and so on. But cars can also find a destination on this road too. However, the road for the cars is actually the left street because it led to a nearby town, and the right street doesn't lead anywhere. I usually take the middle street, but this morning I decided to take the right street. So I was heading down the street when I heard a car coming from behind. It was taking the middle street. Now, as I already mentioned, that street is mainly used by sportsmen. I'm usually a person who doesn't scare or frighten very easily, but I had a weird gut feeling when I saw this car driving onto the street. At first, really nothing was weird except that the car started driving slower, but I didn't think much of it. But then what happened next was just bizarre. The car turned to the right, crossed the grassland, and got onto the street I was running on. This was strange, but I still had a logical explanation. This person probably didn't know the way and wanted to turn around. I mean, why didn't they turn around on the middle street? But okay, maybe this was just a more comfortable way for him to turn around. But now comes the part that made me lose my shit. At the spot where the car decided to turn was also by the part of the street that I was running on, where many significantly thick trees stood, and exactly behind those trees is where the car stopped, to not be seen from the beginning of the road. This was the part that was too suspicious for me, so I decided to turn around and started running in the opposite direction. Shortly after I turned around, the car started driving behind me. At this point, I was just plain scared and decided to call my mom. I held the phone to my ear, hearing it ring twice. My mom is the best and worst person to call. She would react immediately, but always took her time answering the phone. So I was running and listening to the sound of my phone, feeling my heartbeat in my chest, and hearing the sound of the car coming closer. Approximately 3 meters before the car reached me, my mom picked up the phone. I never in my whole life was so happy to hear her voice. I immediately told her what was happening right at that moment, and where I was in case I would be taken. And while I was talking to her, I took a look at the person who was following me. The scariest part was that this man looked like any other man I've ever seen. Not evil, just normal. As soon as he saw that I was on the phone, he sped past me, and I remembered his plate info and immediately relayed it to my mom, so that if he kept waiting for me somewhere up ahead, my mom would instantly know who kidnapped me. To this day, I still have no fucking clue if I was just being paranoid, or if this guy was really trying to kidnap me. This happened in 2011. It was a cool summer night, and I was in 8th grade at the time. I was hanging out at one of my friend's house. There were 3 of us. We were going to pull an all-nighter, so we guzzled down some energy drinks. It was around 3 a.m. when one of my friends, we'll call him Alex, suggested that we sneak out into the woods. I thought he was crazy, but with all this energy, I agreed, and so did my other friend. We'll call him Andy. We went through the front door and snuck out into the woods. We made it about 3 miles from Alex's house. It was around 4 p.m. at this point, and we were hanging out in the woods just talking and cracking jokes and stuff while drinking soda. Not too far from where we were was an abandoned house. Alex was in the middle of telling a scary story, but in the middle of the story, we heard a door open from the abandoned house, and Andy told us to be quiet. We heard an unknown person's shoes step on the dead leaves. Then suddenly, it became dead quiet. No noise. No nothing. But then all of a sudden, we heard what sounded like a cow getting slaughtered. I almost shit myself. Then the person turns on a flashlight and points it in our direction, and starts running towards us. We all got up and sprinted the fuck out of there without looking back. But then for some reason, I looked back and I saw the silhouette of the person. They were maybe about 100 inches from us, and that made me sprint even faster. You know how in the horror movies people who are being chased by a killer always seem to trip and fall? This time, the person chasing us was the one that tripped. But that did not make us stop. It only made us go faster. The unknown person got up and went back to sprinting. In front of us was a small rocky hill. Andy, being the fastest, jumps on the hill and climbs up in a second. Then Alex jumps and climbs it, but for some reason, I couldn't climb it. The person is closing in, and at this point, I start to think about how good my life was. But Alex, being the hero, jumps down and helps me up, then quickly climbs back up after helping me. Shortly after, the person chasing me makes it up the hill and is still sprinting after us. We see the gate that we went through to get into the woods. We go through an opening and get to the other side, and the person stops at the gate. We all stop to look back at him. He's just standing there looking at us. We start getting cocky and start yelling at him and making fun of him. He then puts his light up to his face and makes a creepy smile, then turns the light off. He starts to go through the gate, and we take off again, never looking back. We run the 3 miles back to Alex's house. We sneak through his window, and for the rest of the night, we talk about what happened while watching movies. We also looked out the windows every so often to make sure he didn't follow us. Sometimes I still have nightmares about that night. And sometimes in my dreams, my friend never jumps back down to save me. Hey guys, Unit 522 here, and I want to thank you very much for watching my video. I would appreciate it very much if you would share, like, and comment. And if you're new to this channel, become one with the Unity by hitting the subscribe button. If you have a scary story or experience that you want featured on this channel, you can always send it to my email or post it on the Free Horror Stories subreddit. The links for those can be found in the description below. If you would like to help out this channel even more, consider a PayPal donation. And for more updates, be sure to follow me on Twitter. There's nothing wrong with a little darkness in your life, as long as you never forget, there's always a reason to be afraid.